Hey guys, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, over at FalFans.com. I am joined by my good friend Scott Karasik, a new member of Blogging Dirty. We are back this week, as we often are, to talk about the Atlanta Falcons and their recent win over the Carolina Panthers. We will also preview their Week 5 matchup against the Denver Broncos and answer your mailbag questions at the end of the show and throughout the show. As we often do on this show, we start off talking a little bit about roster moves that the Falcons have made since we last did the show. This is probably the biggest roster move the Falcons have made in recent weeks in terms of adding A.J. Hawk, the longtime veteran NFL linebacker, to replace Sean Weatherspoon, who is out for the season with a torn Achilles that he suffered last week against the Panthers. Scott, what are your thoughts on this move for the Falcons? What is A.J. Hawk going to bring to the Falcons?
I mean, I think A.J. Hawk is basically Sean Weatherspoon at this point. A.J. Hawk and Sean Weatherspoon are the same guy. You know, they're a little older, a little slower for linebackers, but they're both solid all-around linebackers who can bring some leadership and bring some fire to the defense. And, you know, they're not awful football players. They're just not guys who should be starting long-term. If A.J. Hawk starts this week and then goes to the bench for every single week after this and only comes in if somebody goes down for a play or two, I think it ends up looking like a brilliant signing.
Okay. Well, yeah, I know. A.J. Hawk has played in this league for a very long time. He's been a starter in this league for a very long time. In a pinch, I think he can be more than a serviceable starter. You know, I think A.J. Hawk – personally, I think A.J. Hawk has been sort of an overrated player throughout his career. You know, at this point in his career, he's probably accurately rated just because he's a veteran. You know, he's been in the league for seems like 12 years, but I don't know if it's been that long. You know, he's a body. Hopefully the Falcons don't have to turn to him. Hopefully Devondre Campbell can sort of play that role, replacing Weatherspoon or really going back into his starting role since Weatherspoon was his injury replacement. And we don't have to see A.J. Hawk at any point over the next couple of weeks as we sort of wait for guys like Warlow and others to get healthy. It's a move. It's not a bad move, you know, considering the options. But, you know, he's a body at this point in his career. I think he's arguably been a body for most of his career. But, you know, he's a high draft pick. It was like a top 5 pick or something like that.
Yeah, he was the number 5 overall pick back in 2006.
Okay. And, you know, that has afforded him probably a few more opportunities than other players that have been equally good or better over the years. But, you know, again, it's not a bad move. He's a body at this point, so it's fine. Okay, that's one roster move. We're kind of waiting for another roster move to happen because the Falcons are bringing Jalen Collins back from the suspension list, and presumably they'll have to make a move to get him back on the 53. And there's also a little bit of an issue potentially with Tevin Coleman and his sickle cell trait going to Denver this week, and with the Falcons being pretty thin at the running back depth chart, I guess this is me asking a question of, in light of the Jalen Collins move, as well as the possibility that the Falcons might need to carry a third running back on the roster, at least for this week, what sort of moves do you think the Falcons should make to sort of free up some space potentially? And do you think they need to go out and get a running back?
I mean, if you're going to bring back Jalen Collins, I think you just stick with the initial plan there of dropping, you know, good old Deshaun Goldson, who's been inactive the last 3 weeks. I think that's the easy, instant move right there. I don't even see Goldson on the roster. Oh, no, he's still on the roster for now. So you drop Goldson. I think that's the right move there. And then when you put Weatherspoon on injury reserve, there's your spot for Hawk. And I think if you bring back a guy who can play running back, it's Teron Ward, Ward, or it's Brandon Wilds. They both know the offense. They both looked good in the offense in the preseason. And then if you have to cut anybody to do it, you just cut Perkins. Or you cut and I know people might hate me saying this, you cut old boy from Alabama, Upshaw.
Yeah, I mean, those are probably the moves that make the most sense if you need a quick rush spot. You cut Perkins just because you can probably get him on the practice squad immediately.
Yep.
If you're looking for a more permanent move, then yeah, you're probably right. Upshaw probably is the way to go there, just because he's been inactive the last 2 games, I think. So it's like, basically you're looking at the 7 guys that are inactive each week, and you're like, which one of these guys can we afford to cut right now? And I'd probably say Upshaw is near the top of that list.
Yeah.
But let's move on and let's talk about this last game against the Panthers. For those of you who cannot tell, I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm dealing with a cold right now. So I'm going to have to ask Scott to carry a good bit of this show, but I think that's not going to be an issue for him.
No, we should be fine.
Yeah. So let's talk about this Panthers win. I didn't get the chance to watch it Sunday. I did watch it Monday afternoon. Falcons 148-33. It was a big win. I know we were a little skeptical, a little doubting whether or not the Falcons offense would be able to show up in a big way against a pretty good Panthers defense. They certainly did. They proved any doubts or skeptics wrong in that sense. Julio Jones had an amazing game, set a franchise record. Matt Ryan set a franchise record. Really big, thrilling performance. We needed Julio, because I think the issue going into this week was, would the Falcons be able to run the ball effectively as they did against Oakland and New Orleans to set up their passing game? And the answer was no. But if that wasn't going to happen, we would need Julio Jones to play like Julio Jones against a pretty weak Panthers secondary. He certainly played like that. So, Scott, what were some of the things, some of the key takeaways that you had from last Sunday's game?
I mean, the fact that they kept just kind of throwing a body in there and running the ball was big to me. Because even though they didn't have but 3 solid runs, I think they did look pretty solid in the run game against a defense that basically held them to 2 yards a carry last year, but they got, 3.4, 3.5 undesigned runs this year. Coleman just kept plugging away. He really didn't have a good game, but you could tell that what they were doing with Coleman was setting things up. When they had that inside draw on the shotgun sets, later in the game, they ran an inside draw play action where Ryan threw it for 46 yards to Julio that the entire defense bid on, including Julio's corner, who he blew by. So when you've got at least the threat of a run, and you got the other team kind of loading up saying, hey, we've got to get after the run. We got to get after the run. We got to get after the run. It helps out every other part of your team all day long. And Julio played like Julio on crack. He played like he was going against rookie cornerbacks, because for the most part he was, until about halfway through the game when they were like, let's put Bene Benwickery on him and hope that he can stop him. And even then, they allowed another 150 yards. Julio just had a monster game. I think without Julio's monster game, the Falcons don't look nearly as good this week. But you can't put rookie cornerbacks on Julio Jones one-on-one. You might as well just put a gun to your head. I mean, you're like, I know I'm gonna lose. It's just stupid. Just don't do that. I shouldn't have to tell NFL defensive coordinators what to do sometimes, but come on now. I mean, the Saints put 3 guys, two, 3 guys on Julio all day, and Julio was still injured, and that's what shut him down. But Atlanta opened up everything else and destroyed him. Carolina didn't guard Julio with double teams on at least 20 plays. and it came back to bite them because Ryan saw that every single time. Ryan looked at Julio and was like, yep, I got him open. I think there was 2 throws that I remember where Ryan had a wide open Julio Jones in single man coverage and threw it to someone else. And one of them was Austin Hooper's touchdown. And the other one was Jacob Tammy's touchdown. Because both those guys were just slightly more open than Julio and were easier throws. So that's why Ryan made those throws. But even then, you've got to forgive that because you still scored a touchdown on the play. Julio Jones had a monster game. Ryan had a monster game. They were picking them apart, and they couldn't even run the ball that well, and they still picked them apart. I loved it. It was great. It was exactly what I wanted to see from this team heading into the game. They could not have played a better game on offense.
Yeah, I mean, this team has been able to get exactly what they wanted to do the last couple of weeks offensively. They were able to run the ball the last 2 games. They weren't really quite as able to run the ball against Carolina, but that was to be expected. But, as I said earlier, then the game plan shifted. Okay, let's get the ball into Julio's hands as much as possible. And they were very effective at doing that. And, the sign of a good offense is one that can impose its will on another team's defense. And the Falcons have done that the last 3 weeks. They have done that against the Panthers defense that historically has given them trouble. And usually that side of the coin has been the other way around, where the Panthers are imposing their will on the Falcons offense more than the other way around. And it's nice to see that the tables have turned. We saw that a bit last year at the end of the season when the Falcons beat the Panthers. And, maybe this is a good sign for the future where that matchup is going to be a little bit more favorable to the Falcons moving forward. So, I don't have much else to add. It really was the Julio Jones show. I thought Matt Ryan played well. But, I do think at the end of the day, it was, 90% of Julio Jones doing the heavy lifting and Matt Ryan just basically doing the 10% that is, oh, he's open, let me get him the ball, which I won't diminish, but at the same time, it's pretty much a no-brainer. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to get the ball into the hands of one of the best offensive playmakers in the entire league when he's wide open like that. So,
but if I had to give a game ball, and this may sound a little cheesy, but if I had to give a game ball to any single person, I'd make sure that I cut 5 of them out and gave them to the offensive line. Because Ryan had all day to throw. Outside of like 4 or 5 plays, Ryan had all day to throw.
Yeah, another game ball I'll give it to Desmond Trufant. He pretty much shut down Kelvin Benjamin, which I remember the last couple of times he's traveled with Kelvin Benjamin, he didn't really shut him down. I know Benjamin had a touchdown late, but it's one of those things where Trufant has really stepped up his game. Well, I don't know if he's really – it seems like the same old Desmond Trufant, but it does seem like every time we play the Carolina, he gives up a couple of catches to Kelvin Benjamin just because, Kelvin Benjamin's like 6 inches taller than he is. But that really wasn't the case on Sunday, and so it was probably the best game Trufant's had to date against Kelvin Benjamin. I think that played a big factor in keeping the lid on the Panthers' offense, which we know can – score in bunches, and it really didn't look like much of a threat until late in the game when the Falcons sort of let their foot off the pedal. So kudos to Desmond Trufant for that.
I agree. And Neal and Jones looked really good too. Neal, outside of when they got towards the end of the 4th quarter and were taking their foot off the gas on defense, was pretty much shutting down Olsen.
Yeah,
Olsen. Jones looked really good.
Yeah, didn't Olsen not have a catch until like late in the 3rd quarter or something like that?
Yeah, he didn't have a catch until way late in the 3rd quarter. So yeah. I thought he did a good job on him 3 out of the 4 quarters of the game. Towards the end there, when you're playing a little softer, you're going to give stuff up. But they basically put Neal on Olsen in press all day and shut him down.
Yeah, yeah. It was a nice performance for those two rookies. We got a couple of mailbag questions. We got one from Big Boy Brewski. He asked, "What Falcons player surprised you this past Sunday?"
I'm gonna go with both Andy Levitre and Chris Chester. They surprised me a ton just playing solid pass protection all day. And we already knew they were good run blockers. Like, nobody questioned how good of a run blocker Chester or Levitre are. They've always been solid. But they played really well pass protecting. And against Kawan Short, against Star Lotulelei, against Kevin Love, it was kind of shocking to see that.
Yeah. I mean, that was the big concern. Like, to me, the edge rushers for Carolina have not been impressive for a couple of years now. It's really about if you can sort of keep their interior from pushing you up the middle, then you can sort of do your thing. And I think our interior offensive line answered that challenge this week. Short made a couple of plays, but Kawan Short's going to make a couple of plays. So, to answer Bruce's question, I guess the player that surprised me the most was Derek Shelby, because I've been giving him a lot of grief on this show these last couple of weeks. And I thought he played his best game today. I thought he provided quite a bit of pressure. I thought he did a pretty good job against Trey Turner a couple of times, getting pressure up the middle, helping collapse the pocket and whatnot. So he was probably the Falcon player that surprised me the most on Sunday. And on that same note, Big Boy Brewski has a question on what are your thoughts on the D-line this past Sunday?
It just proved that Shelby probably shouldn't be playing three technique in the nickel. Outside of the one play that he made, which for some reason I have it, when I went back, I thought he was playing in the base. But he really was playing in the three tech when he made that one play. I think that the Falcons would be better served moving Shelby back to the base as a five technique, having Hageman slide down inside, and then taking Jarrett and putting him into the main set. I don't think that Shelby is a good fit as a inside three technique full-time in the Falcons nickel. I think you have to put Jarrett there. Just because I think Jarrett's would bring a lot more to the run defense in that set. And I think that Jarrett as a whole would be a better pass rushing complement to Beasley. But other than that, I think it's a good fit. I thought the D-line looked solid, especially against the run. They were playing with leverage. They were playing very effectively. They were stuffing Cam Newton and that zone read option that they kept running. Outside of a 21-yard play, they pretty much stuffed them all day. And that zone read option that they kept running, outside of the 21. You good there?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I was messing with my sound settings. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I thought the D-line did well against the run. I think against the pass, that's where we need to see a little bit more improvement.
Okay. Our next question comes from Jelani234. How would you evaluate the defense after the Panthers game?
Up until that Cam Newton touchdown, 2-point conversion, I thought they played really well. After that, I thought they played like garbage, but I think Dan Quinn was like, hey, we're up 34-18. It's okay to chill out. And just he can't do that in the future. He should just go ahead and say play hard every single minute. I don't care. And just dominate, because Atlanta could have played so much better that second half if they didn't just loosen everything up.
I tend to think that, our inability to sort of finish games, and this is not just a 2016 thing. I think this has been an issue for this team for several years, largely is because our pass rush is a little iffy. And at that point in the game where you should be able to pin your ears back and get after the quarterback when the teams are trying to make comebacks, we don't really have the horses to sort of really control the game at that point. So when teams get into the pass mode, they're going to get us more times than we get them. And so, like, I don't think, I think this was a criticism of Mike Smith's teams, and I think that was more the issue than Mike Smith, taking his foot off the pedal. I think it's the same case with Dan Quinn. I thought our pass rush looked better, but, considering how low the standard is in Atlanta, basically, if we have a game where we get 10 pressures in a game, that's an amazing game for our pass rush. So, I think I would point more to that than necessarily anything Dan Quinn can do. But, I think the defense played fine. I think they played pretty solid for most of that game. And then at the end, they let their foot off the gas. But I think it's because there wasn't a whole lot of gas in the tank at that point. But, that's a conversation for another day. Let's move on to the upcoming game against the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are undefeated, 4-0, have looked pretty good, look like they are one of the premier defenses in the NFL. So this is going to be another challenge for the Falcons offense to see if they can move the ball and score some points against, what is arguably one of the most talented defenses in the NFL, even with the free agent losses that they lost in Malik Jackson and Danny Trevathan. You could still put them up there with some of the most pound-for-pound best defensive talent in the league. So big challenge for the Falcons offense. Also, the Falcons defense, since we know that they aren't exactly world beaters. We'll see what they can do against a okay Denver offense. I feel like I'm not scared of the Broncos offense, but at the same time, if they're in sort of the mode that they've been in for most of the season, which is they're able to dictate the pace of the game, then, that favors their offense. And the Falcons want to be in the opposite position. So as we often do when we're previewing the upcoming game, we got to talk a little bit about the injury issues. We mentioned Tevin Coleman's sickle trait. Now, it's not expected to keep him from playing, and the Falcons have indicated that they're not going to keep him on a certain snap count, but it is something that maybe the Falcons might be slightly concerned with, and I'm sure they'll monitor Coleman's progress on Sunday to see, whether or not the altitude is bothering him. But more importantly, given the injury to Sean Weatherspoon, Devondre Campbell's return to the lineup is a much bigger issue for the defense, since I guess Philip Wheeler would start there at weak side linebacker if Campbell's not healthy with the ankle injury, since Wheeler was the third string weak side linebacker after Warlow and Campbell through the preseason. I don't know. What are your thoughts on, Scott, how the Falcons can handle that spot if Campbell doesn't come back this week?
If Campbell doesn't come back, I think you have to put Wheeler in there just because he's the best option that you have that knows the defense, that's been there for a year, that, there's no question what's going on in his mind, like what you're going to do. And that's who they replaced him with last week. That's who they pulled when they had to pull Weatherspoon out for the injury. That's who they replaced him with last week, was Wheeler. I think in the base, you just put Schofield in at strong side linebacker. You put Wheeler in at weak side linebacker. And Deion Jones should be good to go. So there's your starters. If Campbell's healthy, obviously you play Campbell. But you would play Campbell if healthy, even if Weatherspoon was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Just because he's the best player. So right now, you hope for Campbell to be healthy. Otherwise, you put in Wheeler and then pray for the best.
Yeah. The positive thing for this game is if Campbell does miss another game, it shouldn't really affect the Falcons all that much, just because Denver doesn't really have a great tight end. And that's really sort of Campbell's value, and that's why he was a little missed last week against Greg Olsen. We probably will need him in 2 weeks against Jimmy Graham. So if Campbell has to sit another week so that he can be 100% against that Seahawks offense, then I'm fine with that. I don't feel like Campbell's presence is going to make a huge difference this week, just given some of the matchups that we'll be having to deal with. Just because Denver's offense is really just running the football and throw the ball to Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, and that's really about it. So, Campbell being in there would help in the run support, but I don't feel like the drop off between Campbell and Phillip Wheeler as far as run defense goes is pretty big. And you could make an argument that maybe Wheeler might be slightly better there, just simply because he's a little bit better coming downhill. But if that's what the Falcons have to do, then that's what they got to do. And hopefully, Campbell getting healthy, getting closer to 100% is better long term than sort of rushing him back, particularly for this game where we may not need him. On the Broncos side of the ball, they're dealing with several injuries, none of them to really major players other than the quarterback, Trevor Siemian, who's dealing with a shoulder injury. He got body slammed by Clinton McDonald last week, hurt his shoulder. Paxton Lynch came in and filled in pretty much a one-sided win over the Bucs last week. They expect Siemian to play, but it's not 100% sure, and so that may bode well for the Falcons if Paxton Lynch is basically making his first NFL start. The Falcons got a lot of experience going against rookie quarterbacks and inexperienced quarterbacks last year defensively. So if given how iffy our defense has been this year, if they can get a little bit of help by going against a rookie quarterback, then that'd be great. I don't know how much of an upgrade Siemian is because he's basically a rookie quarterback as well. But what are your thoughts on that situation, Scott?
I think the Falcons would be better off. Actually, I think the Falcons would be fine either way. Siemian and Lynch honestly aren't that different in terms of their style. So you're practicing for the same kind of guy. Really just throw a lot of different coverages at them and try and confuse them. And I think that's how you would beat them easily. I think Thomas and Sanders are good, but Atlanta has the corners to match up with them. The question is, do they have the underneath options? And, Virgil Green, he's injured. CJ Anderson, he's just okay out of the backfield. They don't really have anybody who really scares you out of that backfield, or who's that third receiver who you're going to be like, man, this guy's going to be tough to stop. They don't really have a tight end you're like, man, this guy's going to go off and destroy us. Even their backup tight end, Howerman, he's just okay. There's not really anybody who you're scared of, who you're going, I need to make sure that we stop this one guy. So I'm not as worried about the Falcons' defense against their offense, because I feel like whoever Trufant matches up with against Thomas or Sanders, he can handle. Whoever Alford matches up with between Thomas or Sanders, he can handle. And he's going to allow some yards, people. Alford's going to get targeted probably 15 times in this game. So he's probably going to allow 8 to 10 catches for about 100 yards. But if that's what gets allowed in the passing game as a whole on the day, you allow 150, 200 yards, that's a good day for your defense. And if they pick on Alford all day, I'm okay with that. Let them.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is one of the more intriguing matchups. I know we got a Mailbag question about the matchups we want to see. I'll be curious to see how the Falcons deal with that, because Thomas or Sanders are, you can make a pretty strong argument that they're the best 1-2 punch of wide receivers in the NFL. I don't know if they've played like that this year just because of the quarterback situation in Denver hasn't been great. But, I think it'll be interesting to see if the Falcons sort of ask Trufant to shot on one or the other. I think seeing if Alfred can sort of handle either guy will be a big test for him. We've seen him step up to the plate and play very well against some of the top receivers in the league. I remember He played very well against DeAndre Hopkins last season. I think this is a game where, could be a potential statement game for Robert Alford, because both Thomas and Sanders are very good. And if the Broncos are looking for something that they can potentially exploit on the Falcons defense other than sort of our pass rush, it's the possibility that between those two corners, with Trufant and Alford, you could potentially attack Robert Alford because he'll give up plays from time to time. And I hope Alford's ready for that challenge. I would like to see him have a really strong game to sort of silence some of the critics that he tends to garner, just because he'll make one or two boneheaded plays per week. So this is going to be one of the big matchups I'm looking forward to seeing this Sunday. So now, on the same tip, in terms of matchups, the big scary matchup for the Falcons is Von Miller. He's, he was the Super Bowl MVP. He's, in one of the front runners to be, Defensive Player of the Year so far with how he's played over this first month. He hasn't lost. He's Von Miller, for gosh sakes. So, that's going to be a very difficult matchup for Ryan Trader.
I would be okay if they had Toilolo in there every single play. Like every single play. Just had Toilolo and Schrader in there and said, you know what, you two take on Von Miller. Everybody else, just do your thing. Just act like nothing else is happening over there. Yeah, you take a receiving option off the field, but I feel like the Falcons can handle that just because, or at least have somebody chip him every play to where Schrader's got him right in his body. But, yeah, Von Miller's going to be tough. There's also the thought that why not run the ball a lot? Like 35 times a lot.
I think that's going to be the Falcons' plan. It's like, okay, how do you stop Von Miller from pass rushing? Not let him pass rush by running the football and making him have to be a run defender.
Because when you look at the inside of that Denver defensive line, Derek Wolfe is kind of scary coming off the left side. Yeah, Von Miller's kind of scary coming off the left side. But if you run it right up the middle, Sylvester Williams, Jared Crick, Brandon Marshall, Todd Davis, they don't scare anybody. Like, don't get me wrong, Brandon Marshall's a good football player, but he doesn't scare me. Running it right at him, pounding, grinding down on that defense all day, and then running play action is how you're going to open up that passing game. And they've got an average run defense. Yeah. They don't have a great run defense. They don't have an awful run defense, but they have an average run defense. So I think if you just hit them at the average, that 4.2 yards per carry, and you get the ball to Devontae 20 times at that 4.2 yards per carry, you're still looking at a 100-yard rusher who they've got to take advantage of, or they've got to try and stop. And then once they start focusing, once they start putting that eighth man in the box, that's when you hit them deeper. That's when you give it to Ryan and say, hey, look at the box, make your call. And you give them those two calls. That's one thing that Shanahan's been doing the first half of the season, or the first 4 games of the season. And you go, wow, this is why the Falcons are changing it. He hasn't had to change the call that much, but when he does, it's gone for big yardage.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a mailbag question from Vin Cruz about what's the one weakness on the Broncos D that we can exploit. And Scott mentioned it's the running defense. Derek Wolfe is a good player, but he's not a great player. Like, if you're in a situation where Derek Wolfe is wrecking your offense, then you probably need to get a better offense. He's a solid role player, but he's not Malik Jackson. That's basically what I'm trying to say. He's not a guy that you're like, oh my God, I'm so scared that Derek Wolfe is going to destroy us. Derek Wolfe is a guy that does his job. Jared Crick on the other side, I don't think Jared Crick is good. I remember watching the Houston game last year. Jake Matthews was owning him throughout that game. Jared Crick was, he has been garbage to me. And, so I think running to that side of the ball where he is, Sylvester Williams hasn't impressed me all that much since he's been in the league. So I feel like the middle of that Broncos defense is pretty soft, relatively speaking, compared to some of the talent they have on the outside. And I think if you're going to try to attack them, you're going to run the football, and you're going to want to try to get the ball to your tight ends as much as possible with Jacob Tamme and Austin Hooper, because if the thing about the Broncos defense is, as I said last week on last week's show, they're sort of tailor-made to sort of deal with some of the strengths of this Falcons offense, particularly when we're referring to the wide receiver position, with Aqib Talib going on Julio Jones. Talib is the type of corner that gives Julio trouble. He's big, he's long, he'll press you, and they'll give him safety help, or I assume they'll give him safety help. That's what Belichick did 3 years ago, and in that game, Talib played as well as any cornerback has ever played against Julio. He didn't give up a single completion to Julio in that game. I know Julio went and made some catches late in that game, but they were against other guys. And they also have Chris Harris. So if Shanahan decides to try to move around Julio, move him into the slot to try to get favorable matchups, Chris Harris is as good a slot corner as you're going to find. It's not to suggest that Chris Harris can shut down Julio, but he can handle Julio better than any other slot corner you're going to find elsewhere in the league. And so you have that going for you. You obviously have the pass rush. And, the one way that you can sort of limit Julio Jones is if you can get heat on the quarterback with Von Miller and those guys. So it's going to be a tough matchup for the Falcons. And I think the key for them is going to be running the football, getting the ball to their tight ends, and sort of keeping that pass rush at bay and not having to rely on Julio as much as they did this past week and in previous games. So that's going to be what the Falcons are going to have to do this week. Another matchup that I'm looking forward to seeing is can the Falcons defense do something against a questionable Broncos offense? We talked about the wide receivers. Yeah. As Scott said, there's really not anything else about that Broncos offense. It's basically Thomas, Sanders, and then stopping C.J. Anderson. And you're going to see two very similar offenses that are going to basically try to do the same things. Run the football, play action, build off of that with Kubiak and Kyle Shanahan, because as for those of you that don't know, Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator under Gary Kubiak when Kubiak was first hired in Houston back in 08 and 09. They don't run the exact same offense, but it's the same basic flavor of offense.
It's that same zone blocking running game, West Coast style passing attack.
Yeah, they each have different tendencies in terms of what types of players they like. Kubiak tends to like bigger, more physical offensive linemen like the Brandon Brookses of the world and the Orlando Franklins of the world, while Shanahan tends to get more lighter guys in the Alex Gibbs sort of mode. But, it's basically the same thing as far as, we're concerned. And so this is going to basically be a game that boils down to which team is going to do a better job running their offense. Now, if you look at it purely from the defensive matchups, the Falcons have a much tougher test going against the Broncos defense than the Broncos offense has going against the Falcons defense. So, I'm hoping to see the Falcons defense sort of rise up, as they say, and sort of present a bigger challenge to the Broncos offense than we've known them to show this year. So, that's going to be a big test for them and sort of help out our offense as much as possible, create some turnovers, because Simeon has turned the ball over a pretty decent amount this year. I don't know off the top of my head how many picks he's thrown, but
he's thrown 3.
Okay.
But they've just not been at good times. The thing is, they don't handle power on the interior of their defensive line very well. They have a really tough time handling big, strong guys like Hageman or really, that's really all the Falcons have is Hageman. That I would say is a big, powerful dude on the interior. So if you can attack them and knock over their interior guys and kind of control the game that way, I think you can have a shot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, their offensive line is okay. That's basically what it is. It's okay. It's okay. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. And it's one of those things where you want to get into a situation where you get the lead and you get to pin your ears back and get after whoever the quarterback is, because this isn't an offensive line that's tailor made to deal with a high level pass rush. Now, high level pass rush is not a sentence usually used to describe the Falcons pass rush, but it certainly plays into our favor if we can get an early lead in this game and sort of be the dictator as opposed to the dictatee.
I think it would be interesting to see a lot more 5-man pass rushes, especially if you had Hageman and Jarrett and Beasley actually rushing from the strong side linebacker spot. I think that would end up being a lot better. I do think that you need to have Beasley and Jarrett rushing in the same formation at least a couple times. But you are going to be running out of the base a lot more often against this Broncos team, just because they don't run it out of their 3 wide receiver set that often. They don't run a lot of spread. They're very much an I form, offset I kind of team. And I mean, they probably run your standard base offensive sets, I'd say 50, 60% of the time, which is a lot more than the NFL average. And Atlanta needs to take advantage of that. And they do run some 2 tight end stuff, and they do run some 11 personnel, but for the most part, they're running almost purely I form. So, and if Atlanta needs to know how to stop a Gary Kubiak offense, I'm pretty sure Kyle Shanahan knows exactly the kind of game plan Gary Kubiak runs, seeing as he was his offensive coordinator for 2 years.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because of the Broncos don't have that great third option in the passing game. I do feel like if the Falcons are comfortable with sort of how Robert Alford can handle his guy, whoever it is, Sanders or Thomas, then this is a good week for the Falcons to dial up the blitz a little bit more, because they can be a little bit more trusting to leave their DBs and linebackers on an island in man coverage against some of these receivers than they have in these recent weeks, where those teams like New Orleans and even Carolina are a little bit better at spreading the ball around a little bit. And Denver's offense just basically is a 2-man show. And if you can contain those 2 guys, and I would hope that we don't see Virgil Green or John Phillips or Jordan Norwood wrecking our defense. That would be a very bad sign. So I feel like this is a game where the Falcons, in order to enhance their pass rush, may be a little bit more willing to dial up a couple of blitzes.
And I'd be perfectly okay with that, especially if it's A.J. Hawk coming in on a blitz, because I realize he's not a great football player anymore, but there was one thing that A.J. Hawk could always do effectively, and that's come in on a blitz and create some pressure. He has known how to do that since his college days.
Yeah, and Philip Wheeler has always been a better blitzer than he has been in other phases of the game, particularly in coverage. And, getting him out in space, covering, whether it's Devontae Booker or C.J. Anderson, is not necessarily ideal for Philip Wheeler. And so if he's going to be on the field for, 40, 50 snaps this week, then why not dial up a few more blitzes and get him to where he does best? That's how they used him last year when they went to dime packages, primarily as a blitzer late in the season. And I think that'd be a good strategy for this week as well.
I also think having Kamal Ishmael play a couple spots in a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5 type nickel wouldn't hurt either.
Yeah, they did that last year against the Saints. I remember they opened that game out playing dime with Ishmael being the dime safety, which was basically he was an extra linebacker. So, given the injury issues this week, I think putting Ishmael out there on the field to basically play the run as a box linebacker in certain packages makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think we answered all these mailbag questions specifically for the Broncos game. Do you want to move on to the rest of the mailbag?
Yeah, we should.
All right. Horace at bow to Falcon God. I can't read. How many sacrifices will I need from Ryan and Shanahan to continue the Falcons' offensive juggernaut? # sacrifice to Horace.
I think one every game. Just keep doing one every game. Why not? Seems to be working.
Yeah, I think so. You know, as long as you're not sacrificing babies, I think you do all right. But we'll see what you gotta do. Delible Think asks if Campbell stays out, why not a big nickel base like in the Nolan days, but with Kamal Ishmael to mask the weak side linebacker depth problems? And we just discussed that. You got anything more to add to that, Scott?
I mean, I'm cool with that idea. I don't like using the idea of Mike Nolan's big nickels. I think just basically having Kamal Ishmael as a weak side linebacker, but running the base set is the way to do it. But yeah, same kind of thing.
Yeah. I think if Campbell doesn't play this week, I think the Falcons can sort of go with a committee system at linebacker, basically rotating Ishmael and Wheeler and Hawk and Schofield and whoever else, Beasley maybe, over there, just to sort of get different options out there on the field, just to sort of have 4 or 5 guys try to replace one. So I think that'll work out in their favor. Damon. Okay, I'm trying to read his Twitter handle. There was too many consonants. D-Dre12 or D-Drew12. He asks, do you think the Falcons should re-sign Tammy at the end of the season?
I don't see why not. As long as he still wants to come back, bring him back. He's 31, 32 years old, and he's having a career. He's on pace for another career year. Why not? Bring him back.
Yeah, I think I think their plan has probably always been sort of to turn the keys over to us.
I don't know if we lost Aaron or not. I can't hear him anymore. So I will answer this one. Do you think the Falcons should re-sign Tammy at the end of the season? Yes, they should. Give me 1 second. I think we're having some technical difficulties. All right, looks like Aaron froze. What we'll do is I will go ahead and answer the next question. How good is Trevor Siemian? From your boy J94. How good is Trevor Siemian? Can we stop him? Can we run the ball on the Broncos defense? I think the Falcons can run the ball on the Broncos defense. I think it's a very good defense, but it doesn't really match up well with the Falcons' offensive line. I think stopping Trevor Siemian shouldn't be too hard. He's not great. The bigger question that I would have is how do they stop the run game? CJ Anderson's a good running back. They've got some talent there on their offensive line that does run block effectively. So I don't see why not. All right, let's see if we can get Aaron back in this. Siemian, he's had some good passing games. He's had some times where you're like, man, this guy's really good. But at the same time, he's not a franchise quarterback. He's a guy who you start for a year and say, you know what, this guy can hold down the fort. We're not going to lose too many games with him. We can run the ball and just get efficient play from him and we'll be okay. Paxton Lynch is the guy who you build your offense around. And I honestly would rather not play Paxton Lynch because I don't think that I don't want to see Lynch get the seasoning against the Falcons defense. Anyway, Aaron, it kind of cut out while you were talking about Tammy.
Yeah. I was done on Tammy. So,
all right. This one is how good is Trevor Siemian? Can we stop him? And can we run the ball on the Broncos defense from your boy Jay?
I mean, we talked about this a little bit. Simeon's okay. He's basically asked to be a game manager to get the job done. He does that, obviously, because the Broncos are 4-0. So I feel like we can stop him and get him into situations that's not ideal for him, particularly if we can, run the football. And I do think we can run the football against the Broncos. It won't be easy, but it is probably their biggest weakness, and I think it's a weakness that the Falcons would like to exploit this week. So, yeah, I think we can run the ball again.
All right. The next question is from Big Boy Brewski. What adjustments on the D-line do we need to do to make more pressure or to put more pressure on the quarterbacks? Is it scheme-wise or is it just the defense as a whole?
I think, I don't know, guys, to be honest with you. I really don't have any answers for you, any solutions for the D-line. I think the adjustments to the D-line that need to be made is we just need to use a number one pick on a defensive lineman next year. I think that's the biggest adjustment we can make. I think, getting Shelby more opportunities in the base defense at the end probably will help, just to add a little bit more pass rush at that spot than what Hageman brings. I don't know anything else other than that. I think at the end of the day, we're just going to need guys to play better. I think we've seen improvements these last couple of games from certain guys, namely Vic Beasley. I think we saw some improvement from Shelby last week. So I feel like that's probably the biggest solution. I think sort of tweaking it and throwing stuff at the wall and hoping something sticks only is going to get you so far. I think at the end of the day, the Falcons need to figure out, okay, who are our 4 or 5 best pass rushers, and let's play those guys. So,
I mean, I'm with Aaron on that, but I do think they could do something this year that could help out. I think moving Hageman to that one technique, or just having Hageman play the 3 and having Tyson Jackson at the one technique could work, and then have Jarrett play that 3 technique in the nickel, or just put Babineau in the nickel instead of Shelby and have Shelby play the 5 tech. I don't think the Falcons need to force the idea of Derek Shelby at the 3 tech in the nickel. It doesn't work. It's obvious. And if you've got a guy who can do it in Babineau, or if you've got a guy who you think can do it in, Grady Jarrett, put him in. And I think the nickel needs better run defense. So if you put Jarrett in and then you put Shelby back in the base, I think you end up improving both units.
That's fair. I can't disagree with that. I mean, at this point, you can only get better, I guess, in terms of the pass rush. So a couple of tweaks here and there, I think, certainly could help. I think you're probably right. Babineau, some combination of Babineau, Jarrett, Claiborne, Freeney, and Beasley are probably your 5 best pass rushers on this team right now. And so having 4 of those 5 on the field in nickel situations certainly helps, and probably getting at least 2, if not 3 of those guys on the field in base situations probably would help you out to a certain degree as well. So we'll see. Andrew Schauweiler asks, do you feel it's a good thing the Falcons are getting both Denver and Seattle early in the season?
Yeah. Before they get on their massive rolls, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Although they're both playing really good football right now, I would love to see Atlanta take on Denver, maybe even in the playoffs, because I mean they'd be in the Super Bowl. But I do think that getting them a little earlier allows some stuff to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of a difference it would make if we played them in November or December than playing them in October. I think regardless, those are 2 teams that I don't think is going to be that drastically different from playing them early versus late, other than maybe potential injuries. I think those are 2 pretty veteran teams that kind of know what they are. Generally speaking, if you want to play a team early versus late, it's usually because they have a talented but green rookie quarterback or something like that. I know Simeon doesn't have a lot of experience, but he doesn't strike me as the type of quarterback that's going to be demonstrably better late in the season than he is at the beginning of the season. So, I guess it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing or anything like that, but I don't really have a strong feeling about it one way or the other. Okay. All right, that's it for our mailbag questions, guys. Shorter show than usual. I think that's probably because I'm not as long-winded this week just because of my cold. But I think you guys will appreciate the shorter show than usual, the 2-hour epic extravaganza that we tend to do. But if you want to get your mailbag questions in to get answered next week, you can use the hashtag Falcons Mailbag. That's the easiest way for us to find it. You can also tweet me. I'm at FalcFans. Scott is at Karasik S. You can tweet the show at Falcons PFC. Be sure to check out Pro Football Central for our archives and all of our feeds and whatnot, where you can find those on TuneIn and Stitcher, on iTunes, or not TuneIn, I'm sorry, iTunes and Stitcher. Please rate and review us on iTunes. Give us 5 stars, 4 stars if you like us. That helps other people find the show. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. I think Scott's still, I guess you're at Scott Karasik, right, on YouTube?
Scar988, you can find it. Scott Karasik, you can find it. Either way, you should be able to find it.
Yeah, Falcons. Type in Falcon Central Radio, and you'll probably see a picture of me staring off in the distance like this. So
yeah, probably
the thumbnail for that, and then you can click on that, and you'll know exactly what we're doing. So thanks, guys, for checking out the show, and we'll see you guys next week to celebrate the Falcons win.
I hope.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're not doing predictions anymore, so.
Hopefully you'll see me rocking this jersey. That tells you if we won the game or not.
Yeah, I hope so.
Just in case you guys, for some reason, didn't watch the game and just decided, I'm not going to find out who won the game until Tuesday night when Aaron's rocking his jersey.
Yeah, I think every single one of our viewers watches the game every week, so that's probably a bad idea.
Yeah. All right. See you guys next week.
All right. See y'all next week.